Okay, so we'll get this burner out of the way. This one, I believe that's from Timcast. French farmers put Paris, quote, under siege in tractor protest. French farmers have used tractors to block major streets around France in a standoff with the government over failing incomes, increased bureaucracy, competition from imports, and environmental policies. Garan Darman, the interior minister, says he warned farmers to not cross certain red lines, which include cutting off access to Paris's main airports or Rungis, the world's largest fresh food market. Quote, we don't intend to follow government we don't intend to allow government buildings or tax collection buildings or grocery stores to be damaged or trucks transporting foreign produce to be stopped. Obviously, that is unacceptable, he said. Protests have been widespread across the entire country for several weeks over rising diesel fuel costs, pay, and low food prices. Quote, you wanted to send a message, and I've received it loud and clear. We will put agricultural above everything else, unquote. France's new Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal, said during a video to a cattle farm. However, the concessions were not enough for protesters and the top farmers' union. We will continue to remain mobilized. It's not necessarily roadblocks. There will be different forms of mobilization on the road, on roundabouts, in front of supermarkets. Lawrence Marandola, a spokesperson for the Peasant Confederation union body. Benoit Durin, a grain farmer, told French broadcaster BFM TV that blockade in Paris will happen organically. Quote, Parisians are going to be hungry. The goal is to starve Parisians. That's it. Unquote. Shortly after today's protest began, taxi drivers joined the farmers and shut down all traffic in some areas. There's a lot I would like to go over. It should be also noted that while we did say that French farmers, it was like French farmers were doing this. Apparently, also similar protests are taking place in Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands. To go into detail about what they're angry about, low food prices. It's from what I've read, it's forcing farmers to lower the prices that they've set for what their labor is worth to grow these crops. Proposed reductions in state subsidies for farmers' diesel fuel. So, what it was, this basically just summary of what I've read. If you were a farmer, you got a discount on the diesel fuel that you've purchased because, well, you're growing crops for the nation. And that the French government was, I don't know if they have or they're thinking about reducing or even taking away that discount farmers need to, run their vehicles. And then just free trade stuff, more or less saying that farmers don't have control over how much they can charge for their product. More or less kind of saying that, let's say it takes, it costs for whatever, $1 to grow this crop. The government could be like, no, we're actually going to charge only people 90 cents for this crop, so that means you're only going to get 70 cents for this crop. Got it, that kind of thing. That's just basic stuff that I read on the surface. And like, one thing that really gets me about this is that, so it was a few months ago that, I guess, like, the world, whatever, I can't remember where it's from, but they asked if, like, food should be a human right, and everyone's complained that the U.S. and Israel, said, no, it's not a human right, which it's not, but they were not even going to pay the farmers enough to grow the food, or help them financially to grow the food that people need to eat and survive.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's that. I mean, because I think about that because now the reason why I say food isn't a human right is because I don't like slavery. You are not entitled to somebody else's labor.
Sorry.
You are not entitled to somebody else's labor. So if you're going to, like, say, now my brother-in-law, he said that, okay, what about every month you were supplied a loaf of bread and a chicken? my process behind food is not human rights, because one, someone had to grow that chicken, someone had to grow the wheat, make the bread, someone had to deliver all that, someone had to distribute it.
You're growing chickens?
Yeah, man, we grow chickens.
Plant the
From the
chicken,
ground
plant the
up.
eggs in the ground.
Yeah,
Those chicken
you
seeds,
plant,
Mom.
yeah, you did chicken seed and it grows. You got watered every day.
Yo.
But someone's gonna have to distribute all that. All of that's gonna come from somewhere, and it's A, your tax dollars at best. But B, you're basically telling farmers that either one, you're gonna work an extra, let's say 2 or 3 hours a day to make up for this free amount everybody gets, or B, you're going to pay the farmers for an extra 2 or 3 hours using government tax dollars. With that, well, if you're not going to be paying your your farmers or letting them set prices or giving them discounts on certain stuff, we're basically saying that we're essentially slowly moving to, you're going to start working for free to supply people these foods. Which boils down to slavery equals wrong.
Yeah, a lot of in my opinion, and feel free to correct me if you disagree, but a lot of the stuff regarding food, especially, feels very much. It's at least at the international level is effectively, in my opinion, just political posturing. You're just showing, oh look, I support good thing. It's
100%.
Great, thanks. Do something about it. But when it comes to the local or federal level for nations or states, a lot of it is an understandable desire to help alleviate, or the philanthropic level, internationally. A lot of it stems from a really good desire to alleviate the issues with food insecurity and all that other stuff. But most of this, in my opinion, feels very much like it's just acting. It's very, I'll say this much, it feels very westernized in well, if we lead the horse to water, surely it will drink. And what we see a lot when you donate food, just carte blanche to other nations, poor nations, impoverished nations, whatever, right? Is that they tend to suffer from so much governmental corruption, and corruption can have any number of sources, but it exists now, and it it's hard. You need to, if you were to say, so there's two perspectives on this, right? Perspective one, you are being saved, do not resist, and perspective two is you have the right to self-determination. Okay, so perspective one is incredibly hawkish foreign policy. Right? Nations like the United States or conglomerates, what are they called? An alliance is the European Union. It's a union. I'm stupid. Unions or just massive political global entities like the European Union would basically be coming in to nations that have food insecurity, we'll say Tunisia, and basically saying, look, your government no longer has control over the farming that happens here, the way the citizens are fed, the distribution of food. You basically lose control of one of the largest sectors of an economy, which is food, right? It is now under the purview of the European Union or the United States, right? We now control how the food moves in your nation. You no longer get to control that. You don't have the right to self-determination in that sense. These people are going to get fed whether you like it or not. And the distribution of food is going to be also controlled by us. So it's not like we're going to be dropping pallets in and telling you not to do anything with them. We're going to be structuring how this is all meted out. That's the super hawkish version, which there arises a lot of issues with that. You are effectively ignoring a sovereign state and their ability to self-determination. They don't get to choose how their economy looks. They don't get to engage with governance over food regulations, right? So say, for example, the nation of Tunisia decided, hey, we have regulations in place. I'm going to talk out of my ass here for a second. I think Tunisia is a predominantly Muslim nation, but don't quote me on it. Say they decided, hey, look, it is law here that you can't sell pork, right? We have a national religion. It's Islam. You can't sell pork. Everything has to be, halal? Or is it haram. I think it's halal, right? Halal's the good, haram's the bad.
I've got no idea.
Anyway, it's the we can't eat pork. We can't eat anything with cloven hooves. Basically, very similar to like kosher. And they would come in and be like, you don't get to decide that. Actually, this is cheaper. You're gonna eat it, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna be given to your people, and at that point, you run into another issue where the people might not even accept it, right? Like, you could come in with it's like, look, we had extra pork this year. You're gonna eat pork, and then they starve for like 7 months because you have this huge shipment of pork that you structured your entire like shipping thing around them eat. Now, you can say, well, they should be more aware of that. Blah 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 blah. And it's like, wow, this is true. Now we're getting to the side we're almost getting to like the dovish side of this, which is they have a right to self-determination. We can't interfere. We can only do some philanthropic stuff, but we can't go in as the United States or the European Union and be like, this is how things are going to be now. We are saving your people from the starvation you're inducing on them. It's like, it's not a great position to be in. And going back to what you said, this is why I said at the geopolitical level, the stuff where it's like voting to make food a human right, even if the vote passed, it has no value. Even if the United States didn't, use its ability to veto, well, any nation can veto the vote. Votes like that have to be unanimous in the UN. If like no one vetoed it, it still wouldn't matter. You can't actually change. That UN vote has no purpose one way or the other. It's just people trying to show that, like, I think starvation is bad. Me, France, me, Japan, me, whatever. We think starvation bad, fix the problem.
Somebody.
Yeah, someone needs to look. It'd be like, say you go into work one day, right? You go in, and someone left the sink on overnight, and it's flooding, right? And you got the whole morning shift there, and everyone in the morning shift, and you're the person who always mops, right? That's your job. You mop, right? Everyone in the morning shift comes in and goes, "Oh my gosh, it's flooded." My vote is I think someone should do something about it. Someone should clean this up.
This is bad.
And then everyone else raises their hand and goes, "Yes, absolutely. This is bad. We're flooding. We need to solve this problem." And you go, I'm down for everyone to solve. And they go, we'll do what we know. Everyone will just play into their roles harder. It's like, hold on, I'm the mop guy. You don't know where the mop is.
Yeah.
You expect me what? Just say it with your chest. You want me to mop the floor to clean out the flooding for everyone. Just say that. At that point, I already know what you want. Which, not to be super pro America, but we are the largest food exporter in the world. It's not close. We make up 70 some odd %, and the rest of the world makes up the last 30.
Hoorah.
And so it's like when people vote to make it a human right, it kind of feels like you're saying put the bill harder. Really.
Yeah. And another thing I thought about when it comes to when you brought it up, it's very political kind of thing. It's I think people, when they're agreeing on this, is people are misunderstanding what it means for it to be a human right. So an example that came to my mind is, let's say you're standing in the middle of a forest. You have the right to freedom of speech. So staying in the middle of a forest, nothing's going on. You can say whatever you want. You have freedom of speech. You're staying in the middle of a forest. There's a rifle in front of you. You are allowed to pick it up. You have the right to bear arms. When you say you have a human right to food, nothing's going to happen. No one's going to deliver food to you. It's not going to be right in front of you. If you're alone in the forest and it's, let's say, the apocalypse, you have to go get the food, whether you have the right or not. Even in apocalypse, you have the right to free speech and a right to bear arms if you're by yourself.
For reference, that also if you are in the middle of a forest and there isn't a gun around you, and you say, "Well, I have the right to bear arms," no one's going to deliver you a gun.
Well, I get that. No, that's the right to.
I'm just adding consistency in that if things aren't given to you, you get them, right? If you had a gun on you, you're allowed to have that gun on you. If you have food on you, you're allowed to eat the food. No one's going to take it from you. But it's not like people are going to show up in the forest and just hand you a firearm because that's your right to bear arms. I'm just adding consistency to your example.
Okay, I got you. So it's again, for me, my perspective is, Wow, like we got really off topic with this.
That's fine.
um. So yeah, thoughts, Kevin?
I was just kind of passively researching the number that Noah kind of brought up about exporting. And what I found was the um, United States was first, obviously, and then in exporting food by value. China was second. So the United States um, exports a total value of $91 million. This is based off US dollars. $91 million worth of food annually, compared to China, who's number two, who only does $33 million worth annually. Not that that has any relevance, but it just felt like researching.
Well, I mean, like,
Very relevant.
even from like a let's look at this from like a economic perspective. What does it entail for someone to have like immediate, unquestionable access to food? And when we say food, what do we mean when we say food? So, for example, when people say food insecurity, there's like a couple of different levels to food insecurity. One of the main levels of food insecurity, there's like 4 levels. So you have food secure, you have access to high quality, nutritious food, right? You hit all your macros and a bunch of your micros, right? Then you have moderate food insecurity, which is the food you have is decent, but you're not hitting all your macros. You have a deficit of certain food groups. Say you're not getting you're getting the calories you need, but you're not getting really much else, and maybe not even the calories, but you're getting close. Then you have it's like food insecure, which is the second worst level, which is you're just not getting the amount of calories you need. The quality of food just isn't good. And then you have like food impoverished. I remember what the specific nomenclature is, and I should be looking this up. Which is basically, have you seen those horrific pictures of like the starving children with the bloated stomachs?
Yeah.
Where you can see their rib cages? Yeah, that's that level. So it's important to distinguish when people say they want to eliminate hunger, right? They want food as a human right. Making and producing food of the quality that like Western nations have is a really expensive process. In the United States, there's the whole thing of like we throw away X many billion tons of food, which I agree we should probably try to work on fixing. Blah 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 blah. It's important, but like a lot of that stuff comes in like it's a sunk cost. Most of it is restaurants throwing stuff away. I shouldn't say most of it. My understanding is that a large chunk of it is restaurants throwing stuff away. At which point, most of that food is prepared on site in the restaurant. So we're not shipping a rotisserie chicken to Africa.
Oh
no! The Vietnam flashbacks.
we're not shipping that. We're not like once it's cooked, it has like a half-life. There's only a certain amount of time that thing can survive. And sure,
even after it's immediately killed, it still has like a shelf life.
Yeah, like there's shelf lives to a lot of these, and most of the food is in positions where it's like sure, and then most of it is in positions where it's like sure we throw it away, but it was never making it to Africa in the first place. It just wasn't. That has to be a whole different category of food that's like long-term food that like survives for a really long time, like canned food, bottled liquids,
MREs.
Unironically, I think a bunch of those are actually shipped over, which I feel bad for the people who have to eat them. Seeds and a bunch of stuff like that.
Ramen noodles.
Maybe.
I don't know. It's dried pasta. Dried pasta can usually last quite a while.
Like Twinkies, hot dogs, things that last forever, right?
Yeah.
Imagine just give. But then the question becomes like, how are we shipping them? When we say food, do we want people to become fully food secure in the American sense, in that like we are so food secure that we have an enormously like obesity becomes a problem, which that'd be an amazing problem to have across the entire world, but like that requires a ton of farming, local agriculture, huge cultural shifts. So yeah, it's an economically extremely difficult thing to even engage with, because let's put it like, say you're a company who wants to do philanthropy overseas, right? So you're like, okay, we work with local farms in the United States, right? We work with what's Nebraska, like one of the bigger farms in Nebraska, to take some of their corn like their human corn, not their feed corn, not corn made of humans, the corn for humans, um, and ship that overseas, right? Because it's a solid starch, it's relatively nutritious. It can be used in like making grain-based foods like breads and a bunch of other stuff. Corn is just super versatile and it's really, really hardy, right? It can survive in a lot of climates. So we want to ship corn and corn seeds and a whole bunch of other stuff over to sub-Saharan Africa, parts of sub-Saharan Africa. We'll say like Kenya, and they can farm the corn and build a better economy. When you get your stuff shipped over there as a business, you are subject to a lot of the local laws, and you're probably going to have to engage in like some level of either bribery to get your stuff through, or there's gonna be a lot of like skimming off the top of like your product, and you have to make sure that your product gets to the right people and isn't intercepted along the way. Except the problem is, doing this requires you to, in some ways, circumvent governmental control, which you can't do as a company. I can't go into, if France has certain labor laws that they get a smoke break every 5 seconds, I can't deny my French workers smoke breaks every 5 seconds. I can just not work with the French economy or work directly, like have a headquarters in France, right?
Yeah.
Same way in America, if they get a lunch break every 5 minutes, like I can't really fight that. I just don't have factories in the United States where they get lunch breaks every 5 minutes. So when I go over to these countries, like Kenya, and they're like, hey, 30%, or they say, hey, if you are going to farm this and start a farm here, or you're going to sell this stuff, you need to sell it to the government. You cannot sell it directly to the people. It has to go through us first. And so you can't sell directly. I'm making this up. I have no idea if this is what it's like in Kenya. I'm just giving this as like a pretty extreme example. You can't sell directly to the people. Everything has to be internal, which some nations do similar stuff like this, like China, who tries to keep like the yuan relatively stable by doing stuff like this, where you kind of do and don't deal with Chinese businesses. You deal with like Chinese business and the government. So we'll imagine something similar for like Kenya. You're trying to fight. Like, you can either not do business in Kenya and let those people starve, or you can do business with the corrupt government and the people starve. You as a business can't, or even a philanthropy organization, it's jumping through hoops after hoops after hoops to do anything of any real value because the governments are really, really corrupt. So again, now we're back at the super hawkish foreign policy of you go, knock, knock, it's the United States. Your people are getting fed whether you like it or not. which sounds really cool and fun until you realize like that sets a precedent of like, hey, strong nations that have certain like code of law that we believe XYZ is a human right can then go in and enforce it on nations where they think it's being violated. I wonder if there's an analog for this in, I don't know, the South Asian Sea, with a small nation that produces a lot of chips that has been claimed to violate human rights laws that another larger nation just off the coast of it feels like it needs to go in and correct as their reasoning for military involvement in the area. Oh, wait, that literally exists. It's China and Taiwan. Do we want to set the precedent that like China can go, Taiwan, you have labor law problems, and India, you have labor law problems, and Malaysia, you have labor law problems. We now get to go in and basically take it. We're back at communist proxy wars of like, you're not communist, thus we have to save you, and you're communist, thus we have to save you. And it's like, it wasn't great during the Cold War, and I don't want it to happen again.
Yeah, actually, to another point of that is like, let's say we act like us, the U.S., because like you stated, we are the largest supplier of, food in the world. Let's say for some reason we decide, yes, we're going to start bringing food to these other countries. Well, that in my mind, that also brings a precedent of, okay, well, you want our food that let's say we've been doing this for like 10 years, and the people are, like, they're not starving, but they're not like obese. They got just enough food to make it by, kind of thing. Like, we figured it out.
They're no longer starvation, they're subsistence.
Yeah. So then, but let's say, I don't know, 10 years from now, for some reason, it's been building up. All of a sudden now, we're in a war with China. We can now say to these other, let's just say Sahara Africa, hey, you want to keep getting this food?
Yep.
Send your soldiers over there.
Yep.
And talk about some kind of form of blackmail and imperialism.
Yeah, or you run into other issues where it's like, this is what a lot of like philanthropy organizations ran into, which is like, you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. You teach a man to fish, he'll eat for the rest of his life. You give these people canned food, and they will eat the canned food, and then they'll wait for more canned food. But if you teach them how to like farm and how to like butcher animals and how to do all this other like more long-term solution, they actually end up doing better in the long run. It's why like shipping pallets of water bottles is not super useful, and building wells is. Building wells changes villages. Shipping water bottles can destroy them. So like another example is like we've got a lot of crazy political tension going on in the U.S. right now. And people will say civil war is always on the horizon. Who knows if it is or isn't? A lot of the stuff gets like it's big and then it's not, and we don't care in like 2 years, and it was who cares, right? We have this uncanny ability to like never really fracture, especially since like the Civil War, where it's like we can get angry and we'll politically do all this stuff, and like sure there might be like scuffles here and there, but like at the end of the day, I'm bored. I want to move on to something else. I'm done with my insurrection, right? So like say the United States does for some reason fall apart, right? Big schism. Now Nebraskan farmers no longer work with the U.S. federal government. Now people who do corn farming and butchering and all these other groups, right? They don't have this direct access to be philanthropic, the United States government. They don't have, like, Nebraska's a landlocked state. So maybe air travel, but like you imagine the airspace in the U.S. is going to be clear during the Civil War, and they're going to let you fly rations somewhere other than A, supporting your allies, or B, shooting it out of the sky and taking it for themselves, or like hijacking or whatever. Like now we've built dependency in these other nations, and then it vanishes, right? Now they're in a worse spot than they were before.
Yeah. So, a lot of issues with providing food to everybody as a human right, and the French don't know what to do with their farmers, besides help them.
Send them over here. We'll take
Exactly.
them.